Okay, we've made it to the last step. We've mounted our handle, we've wrapped our guides, we've added our decal, and we are ready to finally put thread finish on this rod. This is Rod Building 101. Now that we're ready to apply finish, you're going to need a few things. A lighter, an alcohol burner, the 2-part thread finish, a mixing cup, a finish brush, and a mixing stick. Before we start applying our finish, it's best to check the alignment on your hook keeper and your guides one last time to make sure everything is straight, because once your thread finish is cured, the rod is complete. Now to mix the epoxy. This is a 2-part thread finish epoxy. We are going to use 3 mLs of each, the hardener and the resin. This is a preloaded syringe, and we are just going to measure it into our mixing cup. It has a graduated list on the side so that you know exactly how much you're drawing out. Replace the cap, and now we're going to move to the resin. You do need to take great care when measuring out thread finish. It is a 2-part epoxy. It has UV inhibitors in it, but it needs an exact 1-to-1 mix ratio, which is why they're in measured, graduated syringes. We're now going to take our mixing stick, and we are going to mix the 2 parts of this epoxy together. Take caution when mixing. We want to gently stir the thread finish, and we're going to mix between 3 and 4 minutes, paying close attention not to move too quickly and introduce air bubbles into this thread finish. A nice constant stirring motion while also scraping the sides and even tilting the mixing cup at an angle. The thread finish is different than the 2-part bonding epoxy that we use to glue the reel seat and the handle to the rod. This is exclusively for thread finish. It goes over decals, logos, any decorative work or guide wraps or decals that you have put on your rod blank has to have thread finish. It creates a stronger bond for guide wraps, and it protects decals and decorative thread work. Now that we've been mixing our finish for about 4 minutes, you will notice the epoxy has become crystal clear. Once you first start stirring the thread finish, it will become a bit of an opaque color, but once it is turned back to crystal clear, you'll know that it's ready to apply on your rod. I'm going to set the mixing stick aside, and I'm going to take my finish brush. We have the rod already into the RDS, the rod drying system, and we can turn it on with just a flip of a switch. Now, I am someone that prefers the rod to be turning towards me as I apply finish. So I have my thread finish in my cup, and I've got my brush. What I'm going to do is, a little at a time to begin, I'm going to load my brush with finish, and I'm going to just dab some finish on my thread work as the guide turns around. This thread finish is what they call self-leveling, which is why that we have it in a rod dryer. It's going to continually turn as the thread finish cures. Now, one tip is, if you might make a mess, have a paper towel ready, and you can place it underneath your guide wraps just like that. So if you do have any finish that drips off as it levels, you'll catch it on a paper towel. Now that we have added thread finish to our guide wraps, I am going to use my left hand as a stabilizer, and I'm going to press my right hand on top of it. This just allows me to have a steady hand while I push the brush into the guide wraps. So you can see the guide and rod blank continue to turn, and I am now just manipulating the finish across my guide wraps as the rod blank continues to turn. What you want to do is work the finish out onto the rod blank by about 1/8 of an inch. What that does is seals the edges of your thread wraps. That's going to keep water intrusion from getting underneath the guide wraps and possibly corroding any guides or making your finish look cloudy. It's just going to protect and create a better bond for your guide wraps. Now, once I have a nice layer of epoxy there, it needs to appear smooth. If you do not have enough thread finish over your thread wraps, you will notice ridges will appear in your thread finish from the thread wrap below. Now we can move on to the other side of this double foot. If you're wrapping and finishing over single foot guides, you only need to finish over the thread wraps, so one side. But with this being what they call a double-footed stripper guide, we're going to put finish on both sides, going from one side to the next. I'm going to load the finish here. Let it make a few revolutions to soak in, and then I'm going to manipulate the finish out onto the rod blank, again about 1/8 of an inch to seal the edges of this guide wrap. Once I have the edges of this guide wrap sealed, you might notice bubbles appearing. There are a few bubbles appearing underneath this thread finish, and it's because the thread finish is saturating all of the threads and around the guide foot. To remove any bubbles in your thread finish, we're going to use the alcohol burner. We're going to light the alcohol burner and pay very close attention to not hold the alcohol burner underneath the rod as it spins. We're just lightly going to waft the flame up near the guide wrap and thread finish. The heat will actually cause the finish to thin momentarily, and it helps pop any bubbles. Now, once this guide wrap is finished, you can move on to the remaining guides throughout your custom rod. If you need to come back and add a little bit of additional finish, you can do so because your thread finish has about a 40-minute pot life. So as you go through your entire rod build, you can come back, and if one guide looks like it needs more finish, feel free to add it before setting the rod aside and letting it cure. Most of the time, we recommend letting a rod cure for 8 to 12 hours. Besides getting out on the water, what should you do next? Make sure to tap into all of Mudhole's rod building resources. We have a world-class customer service team that's ready to answer any product or rod building question you may have. We also offer rod building classes by professional rod builders if you need some hands-on instruction. And make sure to follow us on social media to get all of the rod building tips, tricks, and updates. Mudhole is the world leader in custom rod building, and we're here to help.